right? It isn't that they can just watch a video on it, a how-to 101, become autistic and learn it. So it isn't like a learned behavior, right? So what is it? Well, it seems to be, like I said, a neurotype. This is all cottonwood seeds. I'll light some of that on fire in a bit. Oh my gosh, the loosestrife is blooming. I didn't even see that we had loosestrife growing. That's awesome. Yellow loosestrife. I literally did not even know that we had this growing in our yard. I was not apprised of the situation. Nice. That's so fucking cool. It's been, ow. It's been about 3 years now. It feels like yesterday because of how slow and gradual change has been. I'm still trapped in the same life, but the awareness is very different than it was 3 years ago. Today's episode is going to concern itself with topics of neurodivergence, and I'm going to preface this episode with a disclaimer to the effect of this. Warning. The following program is recorded live and is not intended for children. This program should be considered an active disinformation campaign and should not be used for political or academic purposes. The themes and opinions expressed in this program should be considered psychotic and therefore entirely fictional. Facts are not checked and no sources or citations will be provided. Should you choose to redistribute us without permission, please do so in good faith. Thank you again for respecting our privacy. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Rainbows and Razor Blades, a show from the void. By the Gregorian calendar, it is currently the 30th day in the 5th month, the month of May, in the year of the Lord, 2022. By the French Revolutionary calendar, it is currently the 10th, possibly the 11th day of the month of Prairial, the month of Meadows. And there's an important distinction there because it's either the first week or it's the start of the second week of the month of Meadows. And, that's not a small difference. One day is the difference between Achillea millefolium blooming and, it not blooming. And so it was interesting to see it bloom just a couple days before the second week, but it bloomed in the month of Meadows. And yarrow is not a late blooming plant, it's about the middle of the season. Achillea millefolium, white yarrow. And we'll go see this later today. Maybe probably tomorrow, actually. But today's episode is on the topic of autism, more specifically hypersensitivities, neurodivergence, attention deficit disorder, attention hyperactivity disorder, or hyperactivity, whatever the fuck they call it. But mostly it's about the way that it changes both the way. So let's put it like this, right? You're at the center of your own self and your own soul. And surrounding that is the structure, kind of like a labyrinth, that its entire job as structure, right? And I mean this both metaphysically and literally. Its entire purpose, well, for the most part, its entire purpose, it isn't just to perceive. It's very good at that, right? And I'm sure that was very difficult to form and to, make eyes possible, a nose, skin, all of it possible. Like, it's just so ridiculous. It really is. Like, just the whole notion of life is just ridiculous. It's so unbelievably complex that we can't but kind of look at it without even really understanding it because we're missing the 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th senses, right? There's more senses out there than people mostly will have. Okay, here's an example of this, right? Creativity, right? Not most people at all have any creative ability whatsoever. Now, this isn't to shit on people who just aren't good artists. It's just that there's a difference between you could be actually a good artist and have zero creativity. Seriously, and there's a lot of artists that are like that. I don't know if it's the majority. I wouldn't really know how to measure that. I think most artists probably do have creativity of some variety, but they don't have to because it is a different thing, right? The expression of self and creativity most people across the board, when given opportunity, right, and provided like trying to hit a strike with a bowling ball, right? If you give them bumpers, right, you give them macaroni and glue and paper, and they can like express themselves, right? And clothing is kind of transcendent above that in some ways, because you can be very self-expressive with the things that you wear and the way that you make yourself and your physical body appear. And if you don't believe me, ask transgender women. I mean, geez, man, don't ask me. I'm clueless. But go ask them, right? They'll be able to tell you a thing or two about appearances. They'll probably be able to tell you 3 or 4 things about appearances. But as it goes for like autistics, this isn't even the term that I like, right? Someone observed something. They called it Asperger. I can't pronounce it. Some guy named Asperger, maybe, or maybe the guy that had Asperger's. I don't know, and I don't care, right? Because it's just the name of a syndrome, right? A series and sequence. Is this a stain on my shirt? That's terrible. That's the worst thing I've ever seen. That's horrible. That just ruins my day. I have to change this. That's just the worst thing ever. It's probably water from my hair, actually. Okay, yeah, it'll probably dry out. If it doesn't, then like I'm fucked. Anyhow, then there is like autism. The same way that there's like innumerable genders, and that gender seems to be some type of expression of some aspect of our personality and ourself that we just haven't been allowed to explore, and allowed by those with religious convictions and state crafters and social engineers, right? The priesthood keeping down the people, truly, right? Some messianic global homo bullshit. But I mean, there really is something to be said about how, like, if you don't believe me, why is LSD illegal? It's not for public safety. And certainly, if it is for public safety, why is DMT illegal? Like, you know what I mean? Like, other than the ecological impact of harvesting Mimosa hostilis, which you could industrially do, because it doesn't take much to make a supply of this stuff. It really doesn't. Especially if you have like an industrial process of this, right? Why isn't DMT made by the government and supplied to the people like spice is in the movie Dune? I don't know. I really don't have answers to that question. I just know that like once you're woke to this fact, once you see it for what it is, you can't unsee it. You can't go back once you like see the Matrix or like wake up. And what's interesting is that if you are the center of yourself, and your body and your brain and your mind is designed to stop things from entering your mind and to be able to filter them out. Because if you couldn't filter them out, you wouldn't be able to make sense of the world. You wouldn't know the difference between the and the next to it. I mean, it would all just be so fucking chaotic at every single moment that you wouldn't be able to come to bear with what it was that you were experiencing, right? Like if you didn't know what a rave was, right? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and just been shattered, your perception of reality? Or like, you know what I mean? Like you walk in and you find somebody dead, or like someone calls you and just breaks your frame of mind and you just break down and nothing around you matters anymore, right? That feeling, that tends to be what our minds and our souls and our bodies and our training and our culture especially is trying to make us do. Well, actually, I think the culture works against that in some ways. It hyper overdoes it, is what I should say, because it plays on our natural instincts, but it amps it to 1,000,000, and it actually castrates some of our senses of self. It doesn't allow us to view and reference in plural, for example. Like you can't say like we're having a really good day today. You can't be multiple people. Like people around you, because of the enculturation process and the indoctrination, they just won't let you, right? So people with like dissociative identity disorder, I'm not an expert, so I can't speak to those people with that diagnosis, but I know that there is more of a disassociated complex in most individuals, right? Freud observed this. What the fuck's his name? Jung, observed this. There have been multiple people that have given name to these things, right? but they never really seemed to notice autism, ADHD, and these are like primitive terms that I'm using so you can like kind of know what I'm talking about, but it really is a wider subgenre, right? Just like the cyborg itself being in existence doesn't necessarily mean that cyberpunk as a genre is going to be popular, right? You have to put the two together. And I think at this point we're realizing, because we now have the internet and we can put things together, that some of us are not only just plural entities, but that the way that we perceive reality doesn't seem to be similar to you fucking people. And it's really frustrating for us because the society you've created is just, it's horrendous. And you all experience this too, and you know it. Like, we're not attacking you unless you build and create and enjoy the system. At which point it's like, well, you're attacking us. I mean, you're literally destroying us. It's pretty shitty. And if you don't believe me, like, well, the rest of the culture is also working towards this, which is why we're having a renaissance. We're having an interconnectivity, mycelial renaissance. We're growing like a mushroom. We're all interconnected now. And so we can look and we can say, well, wait a minute. Is autism and ADHD literally, actually literally, the same thing? Or is it like, is it a continuation of the expression of archetypes? Like, can you measurably discern between them and other things? I'm not smart enough to be able to figure that out on my own. But together with all of these different people and all of this different data and self-reporting science, so hey, we'll be right back after this. POV, you're in the cop car. It's actually probably just every Ford or whatever fucking car this is. Oh shit, I got a backing up camera? I stole this vehicle, by the way. It's not my car. I stole it. Welcome back to I Forgot My Helmet. By today's calendar, it is currently the month of snow. And if you don't get that joke, well, you don't know what a cottonwood tree is. That's all this is. It's a cottonwood tree. Kind of want to sit around and watch the hood a little bit. What are you doing? Get out the road, bro. What the fuck? Some cricket ass bullshit.
My daughter, where is she? Have you seen my daughter? No, no one has. Has anybody seen my child? Where is she? Oh my God. My child.
পুরস্কার তুলে দিবে তারই আম্মু আমাদের হামিদ ভাবি প্লিজ সবাই একটু জোরে করে তাহলে
This dude is looking for his daughter. I can't tell if he's like memeing or if he's serious. He seems to be serious because he's been doing it for like 30 seconds, but he also looks like he could just be on like drugs or something. Hard to tell.
ভাগ্নি আমাদের এখানে উপস্থিত আছে অর্থাৎ নয়ন ঘটনাতে পুরস্কার
And then over here there's this.
আমাদের জেরিন ভাবিকে আমি অনুরোধ করছি
I don't know, man.
আমাদের নয়ন বৌদির হাতে পুরস্কারটি
Jeez, man, what a bunch of fucking annoying idiots. Anyways, welcome back to Rainbows and Razor Blades. By the Gregorian calendar, it's currently the 29th day in the 5th month. I think we've already done the intro. So, today we're going to talk about autism. I don't know where that tune's from originally, but it's definitely the autism meme. So, what is autism? Like, that's like a really fucking interesting question that I don't really have a definition towards. The best that I can tell you is that I like the term neurodivergent. It's the people who are different or otherwise kind of like, as far as I can tell, just kind of in their own space, right? You know, some of us, and I say us to speak not necessarily even really for the autistic community, or even necessarily for other autistic people, but us as in like the plural royal we, as in my perspective as a person of multiple identities, some of which are autistic. Like, we're just very different than some people, and maybe the overwhelming majority of people, not just society, but, you know, cross-culturally, we perceive things different than they do. And we'll be right back. And so part of that difference is, what's the word? Like, sensorian hyper sensitivity. Like, my ability to sense things is just a little bit more than, well, okay, actually a lot more than most people. Most people seem to only be able to see in 6 colors. I can also see in 6 colors, but I seem to have a more nuanced, like, I seem to be able to see more shades of color than some people. Maybe even the majority of people. You know, my artist friends seem to have a more trained eye for palette, right? They can tell the difference between, like, one blue on a screen and a different blue on the screen by, like, you know, much less of a pixel change, or like an added, you know, hexadecimal change, and I've tested this, right? So but that's just one tiny example. For me, a lot of what the biggest difference is my inability to filter out information, right? I think most of what being a human being is filtering out the information of the universe. The universe is immensely complex, and if it wasn't that way, we would be overwhelmed at all times. We wouldn't be able to process every single thing that's just happening at once. There'd just be too much. It'd be too much chaos for us to even make sense of the world. And so most of what we are is a very refined and tuned instrument, kind of like an antenna, that gives us an insight into where we are and allows us to orient ourselves within that energy field, right? And that's speaking literally, not metaphysically. And most of what we're doing is sensing things out, right? Like, it's not about feeling things with your fingertips. It's about what you don't feel on the rest of your skin while you're feeling things with your fingertips. Does that make sense? Because the whole rest of your body is still tuned in, right? You just have to selectively be able to tune it out, right? Now, most of what I think being autistic is that extraneous, we'll call it, information set that we're constantly perceiving, is desperately, in some cases, out of alignment with normative society. But I don't even really mean society, I mean people, right? Like, most people don't seem to have a problem in crowds. They can just walk right into it. They're like, oh, look at me, I'm in a crowd. Whereas with autistic people, and this isn't to generalize all autistic people, but people with hypersensitivities more specifically may have more trouble because, for example, the sound, right? The waves in the air that their ears are perceiving might be too much for them to filter out, right? Or the attention to focus, kind of like ADHD, which I do think is the same neurotype, or similar divergence, which is why I don't prefer the terms ADHD or autism or Asperger's. I prefer the term, or especially high or low functioning. I hate that, because it you know, what is high functioning? It's like, I'm high functioning and I have autism. And my highest order of function is that I can upload a YouTube channel. I can't hold a job, right? And people also get the wrong idea about statements like that, where they're like, well, you could. Can I though? Not really. Not happy. Not, you know, and some people are disabled, like they actually can't talk, right? And they'll screech or they'll make sounds like that. And I absolutely do not mean to mock when I do that sound. You know, I'm hyperverbal. I was also diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's, but the diagnosis came in and was treated for ADHD rather than autism because it was much less understood. Now it's understood as kind of a single spectrum of divergent traits and clusters of those traits that, you know, you can... Ooh, this would be so much fun to light on fire. We might do it on my way back. It's a good way to get arrested. So what really is autism? It's hard to say, right? Like, is it literally a too much dopamine thing, or a not enough dopamine thing, as it would be with, you know, with ADHD? Does it have to do with serotonin or adrenaline? Is it brain chemistry? Like, what is it? Because it doesn't seem to be something that's like, it isn't from beating your kids, right? That won't develop them into an autistic person. It seems to be innate, right? It isn't that they can just watch a video on it, a how-to 101, become autistic and learn it. So it isn't like a learned behavior, right? So what is it? Well, it seems to be, like I said, a neurotype. This is all cottonwood seeds. I'll light some of that on fire in a bit, but not here, not now. So it's a trait cluster of not necessarily hypersensitivities, but divergent or interpreted differently traits and senses. And that can lead to a very different perception of the reality, right? It can lead to a totally different internal state than other people might even recognize could exist, right? Like if you're always on LSD, always, people may not even necessarily know that you're on LSD. They may just think you're a weirdo. And I think that as different, in some ways, a perception, even if hyper-normalized as it is with me. I mean, how could I not hyper-normalize being autistic? Actually, if anything, I was punished for it and had to hyper-normalize masking techniques to pretend and wear a persona that isn't autistic in order to fit in because I was punished otherwise, right? Like, I just want to get away from people and get away from stims, so I'd climb a tree. Great, now I'm in trouble for climbing a tree. It's fucking bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. And the way that we treat people in this society, man, it's really vicious. And this is especially intrusive upon people who may not even realize why the psychotic society around them is doing the things that they're doing or saying the things that they're doing. A lot of the times the society doesn't have an answer to that question. It's just doing it because its parents did it. It's like, why did you circumcise the boys? Riddle me that, right? If you don't think society just follows their leaders, riddle me the fuck that. Why do we do that to the kids? They're infants. They can't help themselves, right? They can't defend their own genitals from your mutilation. So why do we do it? I don't have an answer. There is no good answer. There's only answers that are fake and can be rebuffed and rebutted. There's only fake answers. There's unjustifiable answers. There's no justification. So things like that, right? And it isn't just that. It's making kids take tests. It's making kids sit still. It's punishing them for stimming, right? It's chastising them for the way that they are, for no other reason than they're divergent and different and perceiving differently than you are. And that can be existentially threatening to some people. It changes their position in reality if they have to look at themselves in the mirror and analyze how they are different and whether or not what they're doing is wrong or not. Come on, hurry up, dude. I like how they're like building that up. Got like a new window and all that. So that's what autism, I think, is. It's a series of divergent traits that make you different from other people and perceive the world differently than other people. For me, it's hypersensitivities, and also the inability, it comes with also inabilities as a result. So like, say you're creating a bard character, or whatever, right? In like Dungeons and Dragons, right? We'll be back when there's no traffic. Peonies. I should start adding the dates to my videos more often. What are these purple ones? Sage. Goes in all fields. Rue, huh? Wow, look at this. This one came out quick too. Damn, look how big this rhubarb is. This is incredible. Rhubarb is blowing up. Oh, look at this. It's blooming. The nasturtium some shit like that. I don't know. This is a weird looking plant. I like these little flowers. Doesn't smell. Sheep sorrel. Cinquefoil. White daisies. It's not really much of an update. I mean, you can see the blooming ones as they bloom. But yeah, I mean, the season's going really well so far. So, time for me to get some shade. I'm gonna go hide in the shade of the bench. That's where I always hide, right in this shade. It's not much of it, but there's enough of it that if I sit down, oh, I can be just barely cozy. I lost my phone like 8 times there. That's ridiculous. So, for me as a kid, like, I was never trying to listen to the teacher because I just didn't give a fuck. Like, first of all, they weren't teaching me anything real. Hebrew school teachers aren't real teachers. They're just like, they're not. They're propagandists. They're not teaching you like anything like real. So why are they teaching you it? They're just teaching you their ideas, and none of them are real. They're just bad ideas, wholesale, full stop, across the board. Bad news bears. The white clover smells so good, by the way. It's got this like really like sweet, I don't know. It's just floral. It's good. And so yeah, and then my English teachers were all like, by that time, like, I had already learned, like, I don't give a fuck, and I don't have to give a fuck, because I can do the work on the paper. The paper is a fucking joke too. I'm like, oh, multiple choice questions, let's have our kids sit in a fucking room for 6 hours. It's fucking evil. It's psychotic. It really is, especially for the kids who are divergent and need to be outside. It's not like I do understand that sometimes it can be really difficult to have like an autistic disabled child. I don't know what to say or do about that, and I don't have commentary because it isn't something that can be fixed. Like, autism can't be cured, and to approach it as such is really problematic. Autism Speaks as an organization is a fucking piece of shit, and you shouldn't give those creeps money because they're not autistic and they don't support autistic people. Those people try to basically like not criminalize but shame people and tell you that it's gonna like ruin your life if you have an autistic kid. It's fucked up. Seriously, their media is fucked up. There's a video about it by Illuminati. Like Illuminati, but instead of Illuminati, it's Illuminati. So kind of mix those two words together. You'll find her channel. She's really popular. She's on YouTube. You can find Illuminati. And she breaks down like why specifically Autism Speaks is a corrupt organization that does not service the autistic people. And she is not part of Autism Tube. So, right, like, neither am I. But she's part of she like exposes like frauds and stuff like that. And yeah, I would classify them as fraudulent, or worse than fraudulent. They're like ideologically weaponized against autistic people, and they do like perception management of autistic people on behalf of autistic people, but not really on behalf of autistic people. It's on behalf of like cis heteronormativity. I'm so used to saying it. Neurotypical. I'm so used to bitching about cis people. It's really funny. But yeah, it's a serious topic, you know. And for me, growing up, I was tortured. I was locked in rooms. I was spanked, hit, punished, screamed at. And all I wanted to do, all I fucking ever wanted to do, was just wear my headphones, listen to my music, and be left well the fuck alone. And I would have been better had that been the case, had they not tried to make me into something that I wasn't. Right? And that isn't even the gender break stuff that I'm talking about. I mean just the neurotypical way of being, where they try to make you do all these things that, like, first of all, if you can survive it, it doesn't make it okay for your kid. Or for you to have had survived, like, middle school, for example. Like, it wasn't good for any of us. It's not good for anybody. But what happens is that the kids who are struggling in youth don't get support, and so in adulthood, they may not even realize, as I did not realize, that I had autism. I knew I was different. I just didn't know that it was all the same traits as autism until I started talking to all the other people who also were saying, oh yeah, we also have all of this. And there doesn't really seem to be anybody
else out there that does have all of this in such familiar form that isn't also strangely autistic, right? Like, it seems to be that just certain traits, certain neurotypes have certain dysfunctions and certain hyperfunctions. Like, there are some autistic, what they call savants. So it isn't something that retards you. It actually doesn't even really, if anything, it seems to select not at all for your intelligence. It seems to just be like, in addition to the fact that we can measure your intelligence, you also seem to be divergent from other people. So maybe your intelligence is just a little bit different, or very, very, very different in some cases. I don't really have a good explanation for like the nonverbal autistics or the hand flapping. Like, and again, this isn't to be disparaging. I truly, literally mean hand flapping. Like, I've seen them, like, I do stim rocking like this when I get stressed, and I like will rub up and down like this when I get stressed, or I'll do this with my fingers when I get stressed. You know, I'll do the little octopus dance when I get stressed, just for some motion stim. And I love biking because I love motion stim, and I love putting my feet in the water. Like, there's a lot of things I love, but there's also most of the things that I hate, right? Because I'm hypersensitive to them. So for me, it's like the number one, you've heard me bitch about this before, is the lights. It's too fucking bright everywhere. It's too fucking bright. Natural sunlight of any intensity is fine, but any artificial light that's too bright or too intense or even existing is a little bit too much for me. Like, I like really dim lights. The second thing is sound. Like, that airplane in the background, it's not a huge deal to me because, like, I'm used to it. But that doesn't mean that it isn't disturbing, right? That doesn't mean that it doesn't frustrate me. And it actually really does fuck me up. And it can fuck me up for a long time. It's kind of like if you spill water on something that's dry. It can take a long time to dry out. And I feel like brains are very similar. And I have some neurochemistry spilled where it shouldn't go. This is an analogy. I don't know if that's really like a metaphor or whatever. I don't know if it's like, scientifically verifiable that that's how it works, but I suspect that it is. I suspect that it has to do with like down regulation of like the HTTP5 hypernet protocol. I'm just throwing computer jargon to be a memester. I don't know. But the point is that there's a lot of different neuroreceptors that are completely really unmeasured in most people. Because how the fuck can you measure them? I don't know. I actually really don't know. But I suspect that there's a reason that ADHD meds work, right? It's because they do something, right? Why do amphetamines have what they call like an inverse effect on people with like hyperactivity, right? It has to do with dopamine, so they say. Like, I couldn't tell you how or why, but so they say. But autism seems to be, if not the same, then very similar. I have all the traits of both, or I should say I have a lot of traits of both. So another thing that drives me nuts, and this is a pretty cliche one actually, that I noticed in childhood that I didn't know was an autistic thing until I was like on adult Instagram memeing about it. Like, I didn't realize that everyone didn't cut their tags off their shirts. I didn't know that. I thought everyone did that. I have special dietary restrictions because I only like certain flavors and textures. I can't stand to use certain types of silverware that feel a certain way in my hand. I really don't like certain different textures on my skin at all. I really try to control for things and variables ahead of time. So, like, I'll ask a lot of deep questions so that I don't get bombarded and overwhelmed and have to run out and hide in a drainage ditch, right? I think I told that story on my channel before. I may never have uploaded it, though. About the time I went to a club in New York City and ended up in a drainage ditch. Shit, I lost my lighter. It's gotta be in my pocket, yeah. So, I can't tell you why or what causes it. I don't think that it's anything in the water. I don't think it has to do with anything that your mom even eats or does in the womb. Like, I don't think it's like fetal alcohol syndrome where if they drink something or do something. I mean, we could find that is the case somewhere in the future, but it seems unlikely because it does seem to be cross-cultural, right? And so it seems to be it's like, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know, and I don't really think anybody does know. It's a sequence of characteristics and traits that, when aggregated, paint a similar enough picture that you can give form to it, right? That's a good way to look at it. That's kind of what I think like most psychological constructs are. So another thing for me is the way that I organize my ideas. Like it probably has more to do with schizophrenics and disorder than it does to like a lawyer. Oh hey, I finally found one, a 4-leaf clover. I was looking for one this whole time. It's literally right in front of me. Hold on, we'll be right back. See? This one. So that's another thing that about autism. I register all clovers at the same time. Well, sort of. I'm very good at pattern recognition, and I'm very good at finding 4-leaf clovers as a result. Like, that's my Rain Man talent. Rain Man is a movie with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, where Dustin Hoffman is an autistic guy who's very routine-oriented, as am I. I am not... I don't like the term as autistic. My traits, because I'm equally as autistic as that guy. I'm just as autistic as he is. It's just that I have traits that are different than he does. And he's a fictional character, but characters like him really exist. I've met them. You know, and in each person it's different, right? In each person it's a different suite of traits and characteristics. Cluster the same way around either hypo or hyper sensorian input stimuli processing issues or hyper abilities. Like for me, like I process information so fucking quickly it would boggle your mind. Seriously, it would. Like, people don't realize how fast I process things. My communicative skills lag only when I'm processing and thinking, but I process nearly instantaneously things that I need to process. And especially this is true with the visual realm. Like I have very quick, and I've always had extremely quick reflexes. Like I see things coming towards me the way that like I assume a catcher that has years of practice watching a ball fly towards them. Like my brain seems to have a higher frame rate, right? A higher refresh rate. And I wonder very often actually, if it would be tangibly measurable, if maybe I really do have something that's like maybe a quicker, like when I'm sleeping, like a REM cycle, you know what I mean? Like a rapid eye movement cycle, like maybe my brain really is moving faster in some way or with more neurochemicals. I don't know. I don't think anybody does. But whatever it is about me that's different, it isn't without shortcomings and drawbacks, right? Like I may be very quick to be able to find a 4-leaf clover and fully like Where's Waldo games as a kid. I never understood why they were fun because kids would play. Same with I Spy games, like those books. You guys remember those books? There was this other game called Spit. It was a card game. There was another one that was called, it was some speed game, you know, like speed matching and speed processing. And I was undefeatable. I was truly undefeatable at those games. There were other people that were equally as good as me. This isn't to say that I was like the champion of the world. It's just that if I'm better than 90% of the children in my classroom, I mean, that's something, you know? Like, it certainly didn't grant me success later in life. But maybe that's just because I haven't found my place to niche yet, right? But it also made it really hard to just sit under lights or sit and follow directions or sit still at all or move from room to room. I didn't like any of it. I didn't like having to listen or be around other people. I was very over-socialized as a child. I think most people are over-socialized. I think Ted Kaczynski covers that well enough in his essay. You don't need me to tell you that you're over-socialized. And I think that with autism, it builds upon your natural self. You just happen to be very different. That's my best guess. Mostly I speak as someone who is quote unquote high functioning. And again, I don't like that term. Because I'm high functioning in some ways, big fucking deal, but in some ways I'm like disabled and you wouldn't even see it. Like you wouldn't even know that I was disabled unless you knew. And I have a hard time explaining that to some people. They're like, but you don't seem autistic. I'm like, that's only because you don't know what autism is. It's because you don't know what it can present as. Just because it isn't familiar to you doesn't mean that I'm quote-unquote less autistic or quote-unquote higher functioning. It could be evidence of those things, but it isn't inherently evidence of those things. And most people take it that way. And that is a cultural indoctrination that has been inflicted upon them. And more than it has been inflicted upon them, it has been indoctrinated into them so that they can inflict it upon us. And that's really sad, that our culture has been so reviled and so, dare I say it, misogynistic, especially, against female autism. And I do delineate between male and female because there are only two sexes as far as I can tell, regardless of gender expression, because, I mean, geez, look at me. And there also is this interesting overlap between autism and transgenders, which I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today. But there is. You can look that up. That's a real thing. I'm not just saying that. I think it's because the inner sense of self is so drastically different than the normies that autistic neurodivergent people are forced to come to contention with, if ever, and this is a big if ever, forced to come to the contention that they are very different than most people. And from there, it's a matter of figuring out how and how to survive as a result of that. And it can take people years. I mean, a lot of people I know are just waking up to this in their 40s. I didn't know how big of an audience in their 40s I had. I thought most of my audience was a bunch of fucking Zoomers. It turns out they're in their, like, mid-40s. And I was like, huh. Really? Hey, guys. Like, Priestess Sarah here. Glad you're in your 40s. I mean, I guess we have, I don't know. I guess I have more in common with people in their 40s than in their 20s. Yikes. But I guess I'm, like, right in the middle. Like, 30 really is right in the middle. That's another thing with autism. We care very much about the metrics of measurement that we deem appropriate. And appropriate may be a subjective word, right? Like, it could, like best is it, you know, I'll just use that as a word. Like, it's what we deem adequate. For me, age is a huge indicator of many different lifestyles, many different phases of life, many different phases of body. And age is really important. Like, people are like, well, age is just a number. I'm like, yeah, but it's the number. And it's objective, right? The subjectivity can be measured on a matrix outlying that integral to reality objective flow of time. We could find out somewhere in the future that we don't experience time similarly, and that's why people live a little bit longer than others. We don't know. Maybe that is the case, that certain people are in a different time stream. There's no evidence of that. So I don't think that we'll discover that. But it does seem that at least, like, RPMs, like rotations per minute, or whatever, like actions per minute, or actions per second, I have superhuman abilities, for real. But at the down cost of, like, it's ironic because, like, I can see every pixel in the video game, but my fingers physically can't keep up, even if my mind can. So in that way, I'm kind of, like, I don't want to use this word disparagingly, but I'm kind of retarded. Like, when it comes to video games, like, I'm not very good at Super Smash Bros. Melee, and that's the most competitive fighting game. I don't even think if I practiced all day, every day, I'd really even be that amazing at the game. Like, maybe I would. Practice definitely makes kids really good at that game. But there also is just, like, naturally people who are better at it for one reason or another. Those people are, whether autistic or not, sequencing from a series of different divergent traits, such as maybe even literally how long their arms are, connected to their spine, connected to their brain. We don't really know. But autistic people seem to be very different in their emotional, affective states of consciousness, because the way that we experience the world seems to be different than the way that most people do. So, for example, I have feelings that I'm quite certain, especially because I'm trans, so say people, I don't say that, but people say that I'm trans. I have feelings that other people will never have or never experience, because they literally couldn't, unless they have experienced, and some people have, I'm sure, experienced both testosterone and estrogen at the same time, which is not a naturally occurring phenomena, at least not to any degree of what I'm experiencing. Now, I don't think that means that I'm autistic because of that, but that's just to illustrate that you can have different feelings. And I've always been that different, because maybe my brain chemistry has always been that different, regardless of the trans part. I think that most autistic people have a differing perspective on the universe, whether they can articulate it or not, and there actually does seem to be, like, most people across the board, regardless of if they're autistic or not, don't seem to be as hyperverbal as I am. Now, is that an autistic trait, or is that just a part of my personality? I don't think you can differentiate the two, because I am divergent in certain ways, which means I'm divergent, maybe not necessarily in all measurable ways, but if I'm already divergent, it's kind of like asking, well, is that a bird trait or a squirrel trait? It's like, bro, whatever that thing is not a bird or a squirrel, and it isn't those two things mixed together either, whatever it is that you're looking at, right? Like, I think that the autism is kind of similar to that. Like, it's a third thing that people just don't realize maybe exists because we look on the outside as if we're the same type of organism. But our perception of the universe and the way that we respond to the stimuli of the universe and the way that we internally process the universe itself doesn't seem similar, and I don't mean even a little bit dissimilar. I mean, it doesn't seem similar at all to the way that neurotypicals seem to be able to function or not function. I really don't have much else to add other than that. Like, that is my preliminary episode 1 introduction to my own neurodivergent traits. I'm very artistic and creative. Most people have no creativity. None. We talked about that last episode, and I had the little Jordan Peterson pop up, and I thought that was pretty funny. Most people just aren't creative. Now, I don't think that autistic people are necessarily more creative at all. I don't think that. I think that if anything, we're more prone to being less creative and less... Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't really know. It probably is transcendental. Like, the trait of creativeness is probably a transcendental quality of reality that people can have. But the need to always have stim and the need to be able to, like, hurt oneself, if necessary, seems to not be the norm. And I am very much not the norm. Autistic people have a very different sense of things. I've said it before, and that's me saying it again. And they shouldn't be shunned or guilted or shamed for those differences. And you shouldn't attempt to teach us why it's incorrect, or even to teach us the right way or your way, because your way probably sucks. Like, well, you just have to sit still. Just sit still. Maybe you have restless leg syndrome. It's like, no. I have autism. I have hypersensitivity immersion disorder, among other things. So maybe instead of, like, shoving me in a classroom like you did in childhood, maybe we shouldn't do that. Like, maybe we shouldn't have our autistic people working in offices. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know what to do with us. I don't know. I just know that society is not very forgiving, and we have, I've ranted about this before, we have, and I'll do a whole episode on it. Next time, maybe we'll do it, but probably not next time. Next time will probably be DMT. But we have made it so that we have evolved our world to be to the threshold of machines. Who cares if the people go deaf if they're standing next to the airplane? Who cares if it disrupts everything? If we put a highway in your backyard, who cares? We don't care how uncomfortable that makes you. And if it makes autistic people twice as uncomfortable, or uncomfortable at a lower threshold than it would neurotypicals, maybe we should take that into consideration. Maybe we should take into consideration the, and I'm not saying that all the time that we can make exceptions, because it wouldn't be manageable. If every single hypersensitivity of every single autistic person was always taken seriously by society, and not just taken seriously, but was actually acted upon rather than just considered, it wouldn't be manageable, because, like, all the green lights would have to be, instead of on top of each other, next to each other. And instead of using green, they'd have to use blue. And instead of being like, go first, it would just be a bunch of rules that different autistic people really take very seriously. Rules allow for control, which is why you often will hear a cliche, and I do think it's a cliche, even if it does hold some truth, I think it's a cliche, that autistic people really like rules. I kind of get that. I kind of follow all the rules, especially when it comes to, like, rules like trespassing, or, like, when the cops have a right to seize and search vehicles, right? Like, little things like that. Like, I really like the very fine nuance of those laws. And I wonder how many lawmakers have been autistic and people just don't know about it because it was historical. I don't know. I suspect a lot. That's something interesting also to think about, is how many people in history have been autistic that we just had no idea about. I think we can be pretty safely sure that, like, Leonardo da Vinci was probably autist. Just, like, maybe, but, like, probably. Like, Nikola Tesla, like, probably autistic. Get off me. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining. If I have more thoughts, I'll add them. Thanks so much. All right, let's get into the grit of it. Here's some hot takes. I think that hypersexuality is not exclusively and not always disproportionately represented in the autistic community. Disproportionately to the norm, the not heteronorm. I'm so used to shit talking like heteronormativity that I just like I substitute it. I think that hypersexuality is a part of expression that is shunned, especially in females. I mean, there's like twice the amount of language that exists as like feminine or female slurs in my language, just attacking their like chastity, their virginity. What a bunch of terrible ways to be, you know? Like, I just don't understand why that is. I kind of do, actually, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of making apology for it, but at least in terms of, like, guarding against unwanted pregnancies before contraception, I kind of understand building some culture around it, but the extent to which that it was, like, way overdone. We now live in this very sex-shy, horrible culture where like femmes have just not been allowed to express themselves, especially the divergent femmes who like things to the effect of, and I'm not saying this is people that have autism, by the way, but people who like things to the effect of like getting like roped up really tightly, or people who like being like violently attacked but in a safe way with the ability to have an off button and a safe word. Or people who just like BDSM relationships and power exchange relationships in general. I think that a lot of the time, a lot of what is overlooked about that is that it's pushed into in the this is now we're moving into political territory now. I think that for many reasons that it found solace in the queer community, and I don't actually think that kink belongs some of the time as an expression of gender or queerness or LGBTQRSTUV. I think it's autism. I think it's a neurodivergent trait. I think that it's not just a behavior that's a little bit different. I don't necessarily think that goth people, for example, are autistic. I think that within the goth parabole of archetypes of persons that could exist who are identified as goths, I think that there's an overrepresentation of neurodivergent traits as relative to the non-divergent people. And I think that this is also true in punk, or really anyone who chooses actively, kind of not really for political reasons, to just be different and show themselves as different. Because they're trying to just kind of find each other and be on the same team, I think is what it is at the end of the day. Like, hey, those are my people, that's what I'm into, that's what I'm about. And I think that that's like an autistic thing. Not always. I've met plenty of not autistic. It always surprises me that every single other person isn't also autistic. Does that make sense? Because if you don't know you're autistic and you assume that you're like everybody else, it always just surprises me at how different I am than everyone else. I'm always just like, really, dude? Why? It's not even like I'm upset about it. I'm just like very frustrated by it because I am very, 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 very different than most people. Again, that's not even really getting into the gender stuff. That's getting into just, like, the way I was raised, even. Just the way that I am about the universe. And, you know, because here's what's interesting about it. Like, me being very different isn't just me saying that I'm very different. I mean, I'm really behaving pretty differently than most other people. I don't think it's a bad thing. I do have a lot of internalized shame about it. I'm trying to outgrow that. But, I mean, it's tough, first of all, because I'm stuck in my old life, it feels like. I don't know how to escape that. Because I have divergent traits and I'm, like, hypersensitive to everything. And maybe these are just stories that I tell myself, right, to keep myself boxed in. Sometimes I think that. But then I think also to myself, people who are not neurodivergent don't spend this much time thinking about how they're divergent or if divergence exists. Like, why, like, because I could be studying something else. Could be doing a lot of things. I could go do a lot of different things. I just don't know what I would want to go do. I get choice paralysis. That's another trait that I think is divergent from most people. A lot of people have it, but I think it clusters more heavily with, and I can't measure this. I wouldn't know how to. I'm not trying to do research, but I think my observation is that, at least internally, the way that I think about it is that clusters with. I lost my train of thought. I'm rarely really stoned. I don't want to do any of this anymore. I do like talking to this camera. I'm not sure if my ideas are worth anything, but I like talking to the camera. I have a lot of fun with that. I think I'm just trying to be heard. I think I'm just like, I'm not even really sure I have something to say. And I think that that's dangerous, which is why I always preface my disclaimer with, like, warning, the following program should be considered an active disinformation campaign, psychotic, and therefore entirely fictional and should not be used for political or academic purposes. Because I kind of know, like, at some point, like, I use the word psychotic, but I'm not actually sure if I am psychotic. I don't think I am. Actually, maybe a little bit. But, like, I don't see things, right, that aren't there. I don't hear things that aren't there. I definitely think things that aren't true, though. Mathematics is an interesting one too, because I feel like the ability to do mathematics is both innate but also learned. It's like, same with music. Like, you can't teach a non-musical person music. You can teach a certain type of person that can learn mechanical mimicry and, like, mechanical mastery, but, like, that also probably clusters more towards general intelligence than it does towards creativity. That's just a guess. And I wouldn't really know how to prove that one way or the other. Alright, let's go walking. Elaborate on that last point. Try to get my thoughts a little more coherent. So, I think that math is not necessarily something that you can teach somebody else. I think that it's something that is part of you, or it isn't. And if it is part of you, then you have to be taught it. Because it's complicated. And it's abstract, and it demands an understanding of reasoning, of reality, in a way that just my brain is not capable really of doing. It's not, as far as I can tell. I also, just looking at a piece of paper, I think I may be dyslexic. It's not really clear. I've never been tested for it, and I don't know how to answer the questions honestly because of how perverted my view of the world and myself has become, based on a feedback loop of generated memes that are given to me either by artificial intelligence, or worse than that, selective intelligent, self-referencing feedback loop type persons who post about themselves because we're special snowflakes. So says the right one. I'm gonna get a sunburn out here today. That sucks. It is too late in the season to be like, I actually don't need sunblock. I just, don't like it. Now, why would a crazy person like me not wear sunblock? Right? I'll give you one word. Autism. The thing is now I have to suffer a sunburn. That sucks. But here's the other thing. The other way is I have to suffer the oil and the smell, and it isn't just sometimes, it's all day. It's all day long, and it just keeps going. What the fuck is this? What the hell is this stupid ass plant? This is some fucking plant that I've never seen before in my life. Or if I have, I've forgotten its stupid fucking name. What the hell is this plant? Bruh, what is this? Does anyone know what the fuck this plant is? Usually I'm over here pretending I know the plants. I have no idea what this plant is. Some bullshit ass plant. Fuck you, plant. If I actually meant fuck you, I'd kick it, obviously. But that's the thing, you have to learn in life when is it appropriate to exert violence. Here's what's also kind of interesting. Does being autistic also mean that you have a different sense of violence? I don't know. I don't know how to even go about answering that. I think you would have to look at who commits crime, I suppose. But mostly that's a poverty measurement. And the general intelligence measurement, which often is also a poverty measurement. At least that's what they want you to think. You actually can't talk about things like genetic dispositions. It's considered... It's not illegal. I mean, you can say whatever you want. Like, I say a bunch of fictional nonsense that can't be proven all the time. I'm like that chicken over there. That's what I'm doing. That's when I talk, that's what I'm doing. No one's even hearing me. I'm just a chicken flapping its wings. It's fun, though. Sometimes I say a couple of wild things. People don't know me, but I'm just a chicken flapping my wings. I should, let's do some freestyling. Ah, man, I hit the point where I want to be biking, but I forgot sunblock. It was a really stupid decision. It's a really autistic kind of tragedy, actually, because I hate it. I hate it so much. The goo, the dripping. The best one that I've ever found is still inadequate. It just is the case of things. I mean, think about what it is, first of all. Like, what it is that my skin color does not belong at this part of the world. It just doesn't. I don't know where I belong, but it has less sun. It's probably very sad. We're probably very dark, bloodthirsty people, I assume. And I don't really know where I'm from. You can probably tell by my nose that I'm lying. You get so canceled for that joke, it's unbelievable. You tell that joke, the manager doesn't approach you while you're on stage because they know that most people don't get it. They approach you after and they're like, hey, listen, the dog whistle you threw in, I understand that that's your people, but you're out of here. And you say, damn, the Jews really do control the media. But don't rim job. I just want to apologize. That joke is about anti-Semitism, which is a really serious topic, because if you make it into a joking topic, then people will genocide your people. Or rather, that's not true. If you make it into a joke and people do decide again to genocide your people, when you tell them that they're genociding you, that will be part of the joke. And they will take it as such. They'll be like, haha, yeah, that's right, they are. That's cute. We should genocide the Oriental bittersweet. The word Oriental was a little bit too problematic, so they changed it to soy flavor. So I'm just gonna call this soy bittersweet so that we don't get demonetized. The soy bittersweet, huh? That's an idea. It's climbing up its dead self. Ugh. You could tell they used to be dinosaurs. I see you, I see you. Seems like a nice enough guy. He's like, oh, look at the beavers, that's a good picture. I'm like, yeah, last month the beavers. Oh, okay. And he just like walked away in the middle of my sentence. I'm like, yeah, okay, buddy. Look, the babies don't know I'm a threat. But anyways, he was like, not gonna slow down for me. What's funny is he just did not give a fuck what I was saying, but he was just like talking at me because I'm there and I'm female. I'm just like, bro, I hate when men do that. They're like, oh, good day to you, my fine lady. And then the fine lady's like, hey, I hope you're having a good day too. And they're, oh, I don't give a fuck. Look at them all. I like how they're all like secretly friends. You can tell. There's like kids playing, figuring out reality together. I really like it. I like the sentinel behavior. That's what this is called. It's keeping sentinel position, keeping like guard, like a watch and lookout. It kind of realizes I'm not really a threat. So it kind of, you know, it's watching me. It knows I'm here. It's got a good view of me. It's also kind of just looking out this way. Mostly it's worried about other geese, right? These are like You don't know, these could be like the alpha geese. Or worse, the beta geese that could come attack my wife. My wife and my babies. I actually have no idea. It could be two females. I really don't know a lot about goose dynamics. These two gooses, you know, they're chilling too. Maybe they're neurodivergent. You'd also have to like figure out to what effect just like, first of all, being given access to psychiatric facilities and psychiatric expertise, it's kind of rare. But like, say you do torture animals and inevitably, well, not inevitably, but you kill someone, right? Kill them, right? And you end up caught, you end up in jail, and then you end up talking to a shrink. And they diagnose you as autistic. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you get special treatment in jail? Just because it's worse to you? Is it cruel and unusual punishment? I would argue yes, but it's a dangerous argument to make, right? So where are the ethical boundaries of something like autism? Being a diagnostic tool, you know? I don't know. I don't really have that answer. Here, we'll go back to watching the ducks. You don't have to watch me. These poor birds, they... Oh no, it sees me. It's asking if I'm friendly. Y'all are coming towards me, okay? I'm not doing anything. I'm here, you're there. They can continue to eat all this delicious grass. What are they eating? What are you eating, silly bird? Fucking white pickup truck guy is about to come blow up the spot. Ugh, white pickup truck. Ugh. The worst. Literally the worst. Ugh, the worst. I'm about to get him if I can leave. I hate white pickup truck guys. It's so hard to film and throw and kick at the same time. I didn't even kick it. I hit it like here. It was terrible. But 100% of the time I kick that perfectly if I'm not staring at the screen. That may have just landed.
Wind 19 at 7, runway 19, clear to land. Radar 17 upon landing, Kilo corner, taxi into parking, have a good night.
Taxi to parking, thank you, Radar 17.
ground, runway 19, taxi via Alpha, cross runway 28.
Taxi via Alpha to runway 19, clear to cross runway 28, South 17.
Delta 2632, Alden Tower, wind 1807, runway 19, clear to takeoff.
Clear to takeoff, runway 19, Delta 2062.